Okay, so now I've got all the rest of the bearings assembled. And so for the, you want to do the same with the other axes. Go ahead and check the x-axis. Make sure that it fits nicely and there's no play and no excessive force. And then also with the z-axis here, sticking this in place. Going up and down here. Okay, now the next step is to assemble the other end of the flexible coupling onto the quarter 20 threaded rod. First what we're going to do is thread one of the quarter 20 nuts onto the threaded rod for a little bit. Then the other end of the threaded coupling that has the quarter 20 thread, thread it onto the rod again until the end of the threaded rod is just flush with the inside surface of the coupling. Then what we're going to do is we're going to run this nut back up until it's contacting it. Use a pair of pliers to hold on to the coupling, and then use a 17/16 inch wrench to tighten the two together. What this does is it essentially locks the coupling in place. Again, you don't need a huge amount of force because these motors aren't generating enough torque to cause anything to be coming undone. So we'll go ahead and do this for all three couplings. Okay, so now what we can do with the end assemble, we can go ahead and put the little rubber spider, this little rubber thing is called a spider, put that on the end. Now what we're going to do is go ahead and assemble the screw and nut and slide for the x-axis. Now on the x-axis, the motor is at the minus side of the x-axis. And remember we put an arrow pointing to the plus side of the x-axis. So what we want to do is take the threaded rod here and start threading it into our split nut. And you want to have enough of this rod threaded through so that it sticks out beyond the carriage plate by a couple of inches or so. Then what we're going to do is take this, insert the slide or the guide bearings into the grooves. And now what we're going to do is we've got this threaded rod here, and it's going to match up with this. And what we need to do is take this nut where we've screwed it tight in here, loosen it up a little bit so that my screwdriver back down here. Loosen it up a little bit so that we can get it to line up nicely. Tighten it back down. With our carriage in place, first thing we need to do is take a quarter 20 nut and pre-thread it onto the end of the threaded rod. Thread it in for a little bit. Then what we're going to do is take one of our end brackets, and in the small hole in the end bracket we're going to take one of our 1/4 inch flange bearings and shove it so that the flange is on the inside of the plate. Then we're going to take this plate, mount it on here, and slide the threaded rod through the 1/4 inch bore bearing, and then attach it with, screw the plate on with, again, 3 more of our 1032 self-tapping screws. Now to finish up the assembly of this axis, we're going to go ahead and take another one of our nuts and put it on the very end here. And what we want to do is take the first nut that we put on and snug it up to the bearing. And what you want to do is, there's some preload springs in the end of the motor. And what we want to do is get everything squished together so we have a nice tight assembly. So with about, a couple pounds of force, what you want to do is push, back off on this nut, but push inward with a couple of pounds of force, and you'll feel that that little spring washer in the end of the motor sort of bottom out. So once it bottoms out, go ahead and snug this nut up to the inside of the bearing until it just touches. You don't want to crank on it really hard because then you're putting excessive force on the motor bearings. So with that in place, then take the other nut, tighten it down on the opposite side of the bearing. Then you can take your pliers and hold one of the nuts stationary and take the other one and lock it in place. So now the entire assembly is completely rigid, and we can rotate our motor to drive the carriage back and forth. And finally, the last step is we're going to take one of our knobs, which also has a 1/4 threaded hole in it, thread it onto the end here, hold the nut stationary, and then just using hand force, tighten the knob onto the screw. There should be enough friction to hold everything in place so that during normal operation you don't have to worry about the knob coming off on you. So that finishes the X-axis assembly. One additional step you're going to want to do before we proceed with the rest of the assembly is that when we put on this nut, we just sort of screwed it on from the other side. What you want to do is you want to make sure that this, when you actually put in one of your threaded rods, that the rod is actually parallel with the edge of the plate. So as you go ahead and test thread in one of your threaded rods, and then measure the distance from the two corners to make sure that this thing's actually parallel. If it's not parallel, go ahead and loosen up the screws on the back side. You can adjust the angle a little bit and tighten those down again.